Welcome to the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast.
Well, then Perez has got the better of it, and he looks to get the better of Schmeichel, and he's done it. Wilson's going to fall here for Alexis. Henry, chance, goal!
This is me and Lean from arsenalvision.co.uk.
Arsenal 3, West Ham United 0, 3 points to the Arsenal, a point off second place, thanks to Burnley beating Man City tonight, 1-0. Things on the up, and things are very exciting. Played really well today, but before that, today's show, excellent show it is as well. James, Paul and Elliot, bang on form, in good spirits as you can imagine, talking about the game, Theo Walcott, Ramsey's position back in the team, etc, etc. So, listen out for that. That's coming shortly. Arsene Wenger made some changes today. Well, yesterday, or whenever you listen to this podcast. And he made a few changes as well. Chambers came in, Giroud came in, Walcott came in, Ramsey came in. I've missed one, haven't I? Doesn't matter because we won the game. And we played really well. Yeah, it was quite tight in the first half. We had chances to score. We had a clear penalty that wasn't given, and a red card. You have to think that wasn't given. Wasn't a problem really because we came through in the end. Arsenal man of the match for me had to be Oliver Giroud. Thought it was fantastic. His goal was magnificent. Obviously, it was a great strike, but the move before it, wonderful move. And he set up Aaron Ramsey's goal in the second half with some great movement and a great little pass back to him. He's really underrated. That side of his game, it's not appreciated enough by a lot of people. He's judged by his lack of pace and maybe his goals, even though his goals have been very good this season. Goals to minutes. But yeah, he does so much more than that in the team. Scored the first goal, made the second goal, played a part in the third goal. You know, that's what he does. He's a team player who makes space and he fights for the team, and well done that man. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to the guys. I'm going to go and smirk to myself some more and dream of the unlikely victory in Monaco. It's not unlikely because we're doing it. Maybe not, but we're going to do it. Alright, so you take care of yourself and each other, and I'll see you back on the next podcast.
Hammers hammered as Gunners fire on all cylinders, but does the 3-0 scoreline have Monaco supporters quaking in their yachts? We'll find out on Tuesday. All that and more on this edition of the Arsenal Vision Post-Match Podcast. My name, as ever, is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner, but more importantly, here are the two wonderful men who are going to break down the glorious victory Arsenal had today over West Ham in yet another London derby. First, the man with the sunny disposition, Gunner Fanatic 49. Say hello, James.
Hello.
Say hello,
Wonderful
James.
afternoon. Hello.
Say hello, James.
Hello, James.
There it is. Thank you. Gosh, am I the
Jesus.
only one who is a connoisseur of traditional comedy? And the man who drops pearls of wisdom, but only when his internet has cut out. It is pausing in my pants. His name is Paul. Say hello, Paul.
Woohoo!
Oh dear,
For God's sakes. All right, here we go. We're going to do things totally differently this time because we have a successful podcast, so we're going to completely change the format. There were a lot of really great things to take away from this match, and we tend to, how shall I say this politely, ramble on. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the match moment by moment. I've taken down some moments. We'll go through the match, and I'm only going to let one of you address each moment, okay? Don't have a heart attack. When we get to the main themes of the match at the end, then we're going to have our usual free-for-all rambling mess that makes this such a successful podcast overall. Is everyone okay with that?
I guess.
All right. Plus, we're going to reintroduce a fan favorite, the debate section of the pod, where I assign each of you a position and you debate it while I turn off my headset and watch porn on the internet. So here we go. First thing we'll do is we'll just start with the lineups. In this case, I will let you both have a crack because why not?
It's big of you.
Really? Yeah, well, you know, I am known for being big. But it was a lineup that was a little bit interesting. Was it rotation with Tuesday in mind? I'm sure the manager will be asked, but for the time being, we're going to hypothesize. We're going to guess, in other words. James, Theo started over Welbeck. Ramsey started over Cazorla. Chambers started over Bellerin. It was rotation, more maybe than we would have expected from Wenger. What was your biggest surprise in terms of players that were left out, and do you think it was tactical or with an eye towards Monaco?
I think I was most surprised with Cazorla not being in the team just because of how integral he's been. But I think, when you look at it, each change made sense. I think based on the contract discussions that Wenger discussed in his press conference regarding Theo and the way he addressed it, it was pretty clear Theo was probably going to start today. It made, I think that's also just the strength of this squad now, isn't it? I looked at that first 11, and despite the 5 changes, I thought it was still pretty as close to, as strong as it can be to a certain extent. Theo came in for Ox, perhaps ahead of Welbeck, but Welbeck had played centrally, I think, against a team like West Ham that don't have the quickest of defenders, but also a team in which, as we saw throughout the game, there was plenty of opportunities to get in behind. It made sense for Theo to play in this game, especially at home, when we're going to have more possession of the ball. Ramsey coming in for Cazorla, I thought perhaps Ozil might get a rest, or one of Cazorla, with Cazorla kind of pushing into the 10, but I thought, Ramsey coming in was excellent, had a fantastic game. I guess maybe Chambers in for Bellerin, most people were surprised by. Again, I think it's just part of the rotation policy that we're just seeing in general, with given the strength of depth in this squad. And perhaps that specific change was very much with Monaco in mind, given the way in which we're going to look to attack Monaco from the start. Perhaps he just wanted to give Bellerin a quick rest, given the number of games he's played recently.
Yeah. I think ultimately the surprise for me was not seeing Cazorla in the starting 11 just because he's been so instrumental. But what we'll get to a little later on in the pod is, does the performance today in any way suggest that Cazorla may have a fight on his hands to be one of those guaranteed starting 11 players? And that may sound ridiculous, but when we discuss it, I think there's a genuine debate to be had there based on the performance of Ramsey today in that deep relying midfield role. As for you, Paul, the lineup, maybe a little surprising in certain areas. Were you happy to see it? Were you surprised to see it? And also, do you think it was with an eye towards Monaco or just healthy rotation?
I think it was an eye towards Monaco. When he was asked in the press conference about rotation, he said, he only does 1 or 2 or 3 rotations per game. And I'm like,
well, it's 3 now.
Yeah. So there we were looking at 4 or 5. But in terms of his normal starting 11, it was really just a couple of changes from that. Chambers and, well, I guess you could say Chambers, Theo, and in recent times, because of injury, Ramsey. But Ramsey's very much a starting 11 guy. A question of whether he was fit or not. Leading back to your point of who is that starting 11, but we'll come to that later. So I thought it was a really interesting lineup, especially in the light of being challenged on rotations for Monaco. I think he's resting Santi because he thinks Santi will be a big move or a big player potentially for Monaco, but we'll see who gets picked. But he also pulled off Alexis early when the game was still in contention, and he used the excuse to get Ozil off too, who was looking a little stale today, and he's going to need against Monaco. So I think he had a big eye to Monaco in the rotations today, based on his substitutions as well as the players he picked. And, I think there's a logic that says you play Chambers with Theo because Chambers is more defensive, but I don't think it actually works. I think Chambers needs somebody covering him, and Theo isn't the coveriest. And on the other hand, you're much better off having Theo and Bellerin able to bomb up and down the wing, covering each other. If you're going to play anybody with Theo, it would be Bellerin, I think, and I think we saw Chambers exposed a couple of times, though I'm not sure any winger would have covered back to cover the gaps behind Chambers. I just think he's not that quick, and with the high line and with Mertesacker behind him, there's going to be a pocket there no matter who the winger is. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the lineup.
Quick additional question just on the lineup for both of you. Paul, stay with you for a second. This looks more like the Arsenal 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 that we've seen over the past couple of seasons. It looks like it's working. I think we've seen it be implemented more. Can we draw the conclusion that the 4-1-4-1 is dead, finally? Hallelujah.
Well, it's going to be interesting now that we played the 4-1-4-1 a lot when Ramsey and Jack were knocking around because we were trying to find a way of getting everybody in the in the lineup. So, but with the run into the end of the season, I do think he's going to be pretty pragmatic and he's going to stick with what works. So I think through till the end of the season, probably. But once Ramsey and Jack are fit, and you got Cazorla and you got Ozil, and you're trying to get people in the team, it'll be interesting to see if we see 4-1-4-1 again.
James, your thoughts? Is the 4-1-4-1 dead? Can we throw things at its headstone?
I don't think it's set in stone that the 4-2-3-1 will be used throughout the rest of the season, although it's probably more than likely. I think if we implemented a 4-1-4-1 now, we'd probably see far better results than we did see in the beginning of the season, just because of the way in which the team's improved, how the confidence has grown, and the sort of the togetherness of the players. I'm not sure if you can necessarily suggest that the performances from the earlier part of the season are down to it having been a 4-1-4-1, but certainly with the players that are in form and the players that are available, the 4-2-3-1 makes the most sense at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing today is that we were able to combine possession football and counterattacking football. We had, according to Who Scored statistics, 68% possession, and yet still found chances to have scintillating counterattacks. So I want to quickly ping-pong back and forth between the two of you, not to be confused with a ping-pong show, which is a totally different thing. Kids, ask your parents. I'm just going to pick on a few incidents throughout the match, and then we'll get into our usual excessive and rambling analysis where we take too much from individual moments of one match. So let's start early on. Paul, I'm going to give you this one. Theo Walcott gets in all on his own. It's beautiful build-up play. You blame him more or the ref more? It's a penalty, right?
Yeah. The only thing I'll say is the first couple of times I saw it, I didn't think it was a penalty, but it was a penalty. So the referee was in a good position, but angles, speed, it's tough. It's split second decisions. Mm-hmm. It was a penalty. On second thoughts, had Theo got the penalty, nobody be mumbling or grumbling that he delayed cracking off the shot. I think as a striker, you want him to take it first time and just go for it. So it's, it was early in the game. He hasn't had a lot of games. There's a bit of rust. I don't know where a Venn diagram of all the things you could say about it. I don't know. I'm confused on that one. It was a penalty. I can see why we didn't get it. He should have taken it earlier, but had he got the penalty, I wouldn't be bitching about the fact that he
dallied.
He dallied, but took advantage of the fact that he was in the stronger position with the ball on that side of his body, blah, blah, blah. So, gray zone.
One of the things we saw early in the match, James, was a couple of misplaced passes from Coughlin. He's doing such a fantastic job on the defensive side. I mean, later in the match, he had a great instance where he tracked back well and dispossessed. I don't know who it was. It may have been Sacco. It was someone who had gotten him behind our center backs. But early in the match, we saw it. He misplaced a couple passes when it was given to him in somewhat tight spots in about the halfway line, and it started attacks for West Ham. Do you come down on the side that ultimately we do need someone in that position who is better at possession passing, or do you think Coughlin's energy and emphasis on the defensive side of the game more than compensates for the lack of technical skill in the passing game?
I think that side of his game is what's more important to this current Arsenal team. But that being said, I'm not convinced his passing is as bad as most people seem to suggest, although I do agree that, especially in the first half, his distribution was particularly poor. Although I think sometimes that can be attributed to, sometimes just being slightly worse in one department. It's certainly not his forte, but then again, I don't think there are many defensive midfielders in football that, play the ball as well as, say, an Arteta or Busquets, or say a Xabi Alonso. And I don't think any of those players really possess the athleticism that Coquelin has. And I think perhaps games at home when we're playing weaker opposition at 0-0 when you're expecting two banks of 5, then okay, I think as Arteta type player is more valuable. But as soon as you take that one goal lead, immediately Coquelin's attributes really come into their own. And I think especially in other games, perhaps he's still growing into this team. He's still getting to know the teammates to a certain degree. He hasn't been playing that many games in the grand scheme of things. So if there's one part of his game that you'd probably expect to improve, it's probably the passing and distribution and the understanding between him and the midfielders around him, especially given that, say, for example, today Ramsey came in alongside him and they haven't played much together instead of Santi. But yes, I mean, that's definitely the part of his game that needs to improve. I do think in an ideal world, you'd like to have someone who has those attributes combined with Arteta's, but I'm sure if Wenger manages to find one of those and he's available, I'm sure he'd seek to get him too. And I mean, in addition to that, I think we'll get another defensive midfielder either way. Flamini's probably gone in the summer. Arteta, even if he extends his deal for 1 year, I reckon he'll come in as sort of third defensive midfield option, or maybe even kind of play a coaching role if he even stays. And that being said, Wenger will probably look to have a second defensive midfielder, a defensive midfielder who can play to then sit alongside Coquelin in certain games, perhaps, or just to have the option of the two.
As you know, statistics are never wrong. Mikel Arteta averages around 93% passing in the Premier League. Francis Coquelin is at 83%, but now is on 4 or 5 games in a row where he's sub 80%. It's not to take away from anything he does. I just wonder if some of the struggles we've had playing through the midfield this season boil down to the fact that Mertesacker and Koscielny cannot give him the ball and expect that he will turn and play the ball to a midfield teammate or an attacking teammate. One of the reasons I think that Koscielny was second on the team in touches with, I believe it's 85 touches, second only to Ramsey's 95, is because you see Coquelin, when he does receive the ball, much more comfortable giving it right back to the center backs, which Arteta maybe doesn't do as much. Having said that, I agree we need someone who does his job defensively, and what he's doing defensively can't be overstated. It's absolutely crucial to our success. Let's talk Callum Chambers, Paul. His footwork is sensationally created a spectacular chance for Ramsey. Going forward, he looks like a player who maybe could become a defensive midfielder in the future because he has that footwork and that vision. Defensively, especially when he's out wide, there were some issues. What did you make of the couple of occasions where he got beat down the wing? Lack of pace, lack of awareness, combination of the two. What's your overall take on Chambers in both halves of the pitch?
I think it started with the lack of pace, and then a little bit of loss of confidence meant that he was standing off his marquee to compound the issue. So I think he kind of lost his positioning a little bit, lost his distance. So, with the ball at his feet, he's really good, whether he's deep or attacking, crossing a ball. He picked out a couple of really good crosses. I'll be much happier when he's playing the backup centre-back or starting centre-back in a year or two's time. And I absolutely agree that he seems to have the makings of a great DM. I mean, calm under pressure, always seems to come away with the ball when there's one or two guys descending on him. Head up, picks out a pass, can distribute, physical, actually fast in the middle of the park, but not up against wingers. I mean, fast is the wrong word, but pretty mobile, gets around. So to me, if Arsenal's listening, I think he should play DM in the future.
Also wouldn't hurt to have a center back with that kind of footwork, right? I mean, he looks very comfortable on the ball. I'll stay with you just quickly since we're talking Chambers. The chance he created for Ramsey, beautiful vision. Ramsey should head it there maybe?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably right on the cusp. I mean, look at it as it was. He had it on target just under the crossbar, just a little bit of a different touch, and that was in. So, yeah, probably, a striker, I think, would have gone for that with the head. So, yeah, but...
And don't worry, by the way, everyone who wants to talk Giroud and Ramsey overall, we're going to get to that in our part 2 of the pod where we break it down with the kind of Class A analysis that you tune in for. But right now, I want to keep moving through some of the moments in the match. We really started pinging around in midfield and we were creating chances and opening them up. The final ball just wouldn't fall. Another Theo moment. He was having a bit of a Giroud against Monaco day, was getting into good positions. I thought Theo was very threatening, dangerous. We'll get to that in a moment too. But the chance where he slips and misses the wide open goal, James, 2 questions there. Should Ozil do better on that little volley from the layoff? He hits it right at the keeper. And then do you have a little sympathy for Theo because he's falling down, or is that too easy and he's got to put it away?
Yeah, I think Ozil can probably do a little bit better. It's on his right foot, but he does get a good enough connection to force Adrian to push it out. I think you can be a little sympathetic for Theo. The problem is it came at a time when he'd already missed that opportunity early on where he was taken down for the penalty. Mm-hmm. And was the time he got put through on goal and had it saved, was that before or after that incident?
I'm not sure. We're going to get to that one next. So because chronologically, I wrote them down, and I'm not sure which way I wrote them down in the correct order
sure.
or not. Probably
I think it may have come third, and so having already seen him miss 2 chances, it was that much more frustrating because it was effectively an open goal. But it was a difficult chance. There's no denying that. So yeah, I mean, out of the 3 chances, you'd like to, you think by law of probabilities, especially a player like Theo would put one away. But then again, he's getting in the position to create those chances too. So there's both a positive and negative associated with that performance from Theo as a whole.
Considering that we just mentioned the incident, I'll turn it over to you, Paul, real quick. The one where he was put through, I think it was by Ramsey. He's in behind. Adrian closes the angle really well. I think old Theo, younger old Theo, passes it in at the near post probably, but he did close the angle well there. He had 2 players open for the cutback. Should he have cut it back, or as a forward, do you expect him to take on the chance there? And how bad a miss is that one?
I expect him to go for it. And, on the replay was really when I saw the guys who were open for him, and they were kind of open right at the last minute. In the build-up to taking a crack at that shot, I'm not sure it was that obvious. There was a guy about to be, I think it was Ozil was one of them, who was waving his hands around afterwards as in, I'm here in the 6-yard box wide open. Well, you're only wide open at the last instant. So I think a striker goes for it. And the shame of it was his eye isn't in or his timing's a little off. But it was a very classic Theo game in that, most of our exciting attacking threat came down his side. He was frustrating, but he was also kind of getting things going. And he was actually pretty good at holding on to possession or losing it recycled to us. So this whole game was beginning to revolve as it used to in the past, swirling around that top right-hand corner. And, it does turn the screw on those guys. And if you look at where the goal finally came from, not to give Theo too much credit, it's from that Theo swirl, that kind of the hole that Theo creates and leaves up there. Mm-hmm. So
I agree with that. We're going to get onto the Theo Welbeck conundrum in a minute and talk a little more about Theo's day overall and where this leaves him. But I want to get to the goal. It was a brilliant first half, really. There was a lot of beautiful, typical Arsenal play, and typical also in that we didn't take advantage of our dominance, but we did right on the stroke of halftime, I mean, literally. And it's a beautiful goal. James, your thoughts on the goal? Some ping-pong passing between Ramsey, Ozil, Giroud, and then the finish. Walk us through the goal and your thoughts on it.
That goal was absolutely delicious. It came at such an important time because, as you said, we had dominated that first half, but you felt as a fan frustrated that we hadn't put away one of those chances. And the longer a game goes on like that, the more belief it gives the opposition. That interplay between Ozil and Ramsey, the running off the ball, the little dummy for Giroud before he then takes it on, beats a couple of players, and the finish is absolutely fantastic. Just arrowed it into the top left corner. Just before half time, I think it was literally 46 minutes and 59 seconds, or was it 45 minutes and 59 seconds? However much time was added on.
He had added on 1 minute, and it came literally on the stroke of 46 minutes.
Right.
47.
The three of them in general had a great play in that, had a great game in that, just specifically in that final third. Ozil not as much, but the running off the ball from Ramsey all game long, the flicks from Giroud, the combinations between the two, and that was epitomised in that goal. And then, of course, the second, which I'm sure you'll come to.
I like how you tried to stray off onto the topic of Ramsey and Giroud, but you held your nerve. You showed great mental strength there. Second half, we didn't start quite as brightly, and I have to ask you the next question, Paul. Why is Per Mertesacker losing his mind?
I I don't know. Did he have a terrible game?
Well, no, he had another one of those moments where he stepped up into sort of no man's land near the halfway line and let men get in behind him and created that space. I mean, he's shown a real lack of, I want to say, experience or intelligence in his decision-making recently, which doesn't make sense for such an intelligent and experienced player. And he's really leaving a lot of work for Koscielny and his fullbacks to do behind him. What do you think is going on with Mertesacker?
Well,
and if Gabriel is fit, would you have to consider the question of whether Mertesacker is still absolutely nailed on as a starting center back?
I think you'd have to consider it, but I think at this stage it's still pers. Just in terms of where this team is at, we're not ready to be swapping out centre backs, and Gabriel probably isn't ready to take on that burden yet. I've been pretty critical of Per in recent times, but he was solid as a rock against United and a big piece of that defence.
Yes, he was.
But even at that time, my feeling on it was that was a defensive setup and a game that suited his game. Whereas, maybe not thinking too much about the incident you're talking about, but there was a point at which he was playing midfield against West Ham. I mean, he had just been sucked up into the 1-2s in midfield. And I'm not saying that was wrong because, the way United were lined up and West Ham United were lined up and the way we needed to recycle the ball and get some movement going, and Coquelin's not necessarily the most progressive passer in that position. Sympathy for him in that he hasn't really played against a bus too often in recent times. For Coquelin. So, it was the kind of game that Mertesacker is starting to feel completely out of his element. He's literally just at the bottom of their final third, and he's got 2/3 of the pitch behind him. That's not a game he's going to start feeling very comfortable in. And your point,
is he stepping up? I mean, is he tired? Is it fatigue? I think, and I never played center back or fullback or midfield or striker or winger or goalkeeper or coach or referee. But as someone who watches football,
you've watched other people getting
I've watched
tired.
other people do it, which qualifies me to have pretty much any opinion I want.
Expert.
Is it tiredness? Is it fatigue when, as a center forward, especially one or center back who doesn't have a lot of pace, you step up to try to make the interception or the tackle you're clearly not going to get to because you'd rather not have to turn and run back 25 yards alongside the center forward? I mean, is he taking sort of the lazy way out there, in that he knows he's not going to get to the ball, but by stepping up he avoids the alternative, which is a 25-yard gut-busting run back, wrestling with the center forward.
A 25-yard run of ultimate embarrassment because he's going to be 15 yards behind. I don't think it's physical tiredness. I do think he's starting to get a bit gun-shy of looking stupid running backwards. That, us having that high a line.
He needs to talk to me. I'll tell him about not ever feeling bad looking stupid. Yeah, I'll give him all the confidence he wants.
With aplomb. So yeah. I do think that's part of the issue. I think he's a little psyched out of the role. I mean, it just doesn't. If I were out there recruiting centre backs for Arsenal and the way we play, he wouldn't fit our profile. You would need pace. You certainly wouldn't need a dearth of pace to play a centre-back when at least half our games you can expect us playing with the high line. And against United, he was playing tiki-taka in their final third, leaving 2/3 of the pitch behind him. I'm not surprised he was he was willing to gamble on moving forward because there was nothing for him running backwards.
Yeah, I don't think he had a bad game today, by the way. I think he could have looked to have had a worse game if Koscielny hadn't had such a fantastic game, because Koscielny was there to clean up a lot of things, as were Monreal, Coquelin, and to a lesser extent, Chambers at times. We're going to get to the next two goals pretty soon here and then get into the analysis section of the pod that everyone is baying for. But the one thing that I realized, now look, Allardyce hasn't had West Ham playing this season the way Allardyce teams have played in previous seasons. But James, how nice is it to go up against, an Allardyce team and not be in a situation where you're dreading the the corner kicks and the free kicks. I mean, we won 55% of the aerial duels today to their 45%. They did have corners, they did have free kicks, and we handled them really well. What did you make of that?
Well, it's fantastic, really. I don't think it's really a surprise now at this stage of the season, because I think certainly from an attacking set pieces point of view, we've scored, I think is it the second most goals from set pieces in the league? I could be wrong on that, but we're certainly up there. Defensively, it's no longer an aspect of the game that we as fans feel as fearful about, because we seem to be a lot more solid in general defending set piece. I think some of that comes down to having a player like Giroud as our striker who's so good at that. That's also a part of the game that Mertesacker comes in as such a valuable asset to the side. That height, his ability in the air is phenomenal, and I think that's one of the most exciting things with you guys talking about Mertesacker but with this squad, is that by having two players that are so different to each other in the style that they go about playing that centre-back role in Paulista and Per, it really allows us to adapt to the situation. In that games that maybe we go away from home, where we're going to sit a little deeper, we're not going to allow as much space in behind, we're not expecting that many runners coming in behind that back four, but a lot of balls being thrown into the mixer, so to speak, a lot of crosses coming in, then you'd probably think that Mertesacker and Koscielny partnership is best suited for it. But you saw where it really got exposed was those games, again, away from home, but where teams came at us with a lot of pace, and we decided to continue to play that high line. I mean, look to Anfield last season, that was case in point. And those are games where Mertesacker really struggles. But yeah, so, clearly there seems to have been a lot more focus perhaps on the set pieces in general, because we've looked very, very solid. We've hardly conceded, and it's now there's not really an aspect to this team where you think even the lower leagues, the lower position teams can really sort of target this Arsenal side. That tended to be the one major strategy that teams they'd sit behind a lot, try and win free kicks on the counter and just throw it in, and over the course of a season we would often concede a few, which was extremely costly. But now that's one of the probably the major reasons, in fact, that we're now just so consistent and efficient against the smaller teams, because they just find it much harder to break us down, because they're certainly not going to be as good with the ball as a team like Arsenal. So
yeah. By the way, this podcast is brought to you by the iMac startup noise. In case you missed it just moments ago. Yeah, I mean, it's so nice not to fill your pants every time a team has a corner kick or a free kick. It wasn't so long ago. And I think some of that has to go to the goalkeeping, whether it's Chesney or Ospina. When we had Almunia, who could turn up at any position in the 18-yard box or beyond at any given moment, I think the center backs, everyone defending set pieces, had no idea what to expect. Now
I got to say, Elliot, I may not have filled my pants with poo today, but I did fill my pants.
Oh yeah, well, all right. That means you're just prodigious in your offering. That's if you can fill your pants.
I enjoyed our play today.
If you can fill your pants with that substance, then you you need to be heading down to the donation center, my friend. You could make quite a large amount of money doing that.
A little too late for that.
Well, all right, fine. Oh, really? Well, congratulations to you. Moving on quickly, hopefully. Let's talk goals. Paul, you get the second goal. What do you think? Brilliant interchange between Giroud and Ramsey, which was a theme throughout the day. It was a confident finish, a first touch finish, somewhat reminiscent of the winner in the FA Cup final. Spectacular example of Arsenal football on display for the second goal.
Yeah, I think you hit the nails all on the head there. So, for man of the match, for me, it's either Koscielny or the Ramsey-Giroud partnership. It was very defining. Mm-hmm. Again, coming from that, if you like, that upper right-hand quadrant of play, it was just great. I get the feeling, listening to pundits, well, going back to the previous point, pundits are about a season behind because they still think we're shit on set pieces where we've actually been very good scoring.
Well,
and
to hear it, Tony Gale thought West Ham was having a fantastic game.
Yeah.
We were, creating chance after chance. So, I think you put the pundits to one side, but go on.
Yeah, you can. And it was a funny old game, though, because it was, the first half was going to the West Ham plan, although we had some really good play, and then woof, we had that cracker at the end of it. And the start of the second half was kind of going the West Ham way. Mm-hmm. But we had those moments of brilliance that either turned into goals or kind of broke down and frustrated. And this was one where all the dots joined. It was just beautiful. It was synchronicity. I think, that working them over in that top quadrant where Theo and Ramsey and Giroud were all playing their trade with Ozil joining the dots. Eventually the gap started to show, and those two twice tore them a new one. And I don't think people outside of the Arsenal faithful will realize what a good game that was today and how good those goals were.
Yeah, I thought it was one of the most fluid displays of football from Arsenal this season with very few exceptions. James, the referees swapped out, but the second goal meant we didn't really have to worry as much about Anthony Taylor doing what Anthony Taylor does, although he gave Cazorla a card for a foul for what appeared to be a foul on him. That aside, in the second half, Ozil was a little less sparkly than he was the first half. Were you disappointed with the second half performance? There were quite a few counterattacks where we got right to the edge of their box, and Ozil seemed to miss what arguably was a pretty easy pass by his standards. What did you make of his performance, particularly in the counterattack second half?
Yeah, I don't think it was his best performance by any stretch of the imagination in the second half. He did make a couple of sloppy passes. It always surprises me how quick he is on the counter. He's actually, you can't really tell based on his physique and his character. Maybe, again, that's just part of his whole sort of body language that's kind of deceptive. But he is quick on the ball, and I thought in the first half he had a couple of really good plays. He had that chance that was saved by Adrian and that Walcott should have then put in. He was obviously integral in the first goal. But yeah, that's part of the reason why he got hauled off, I think, in the second half. And he's played a lot of games since he's been back from injury. So I don't think it's that much of a surprise, and I think it's good to actually to get him some minutes off, and he'll be ready and raring once again for Monaco. But when the team's playing as well as that, you can allow for some of your best players to not be fully at their best, and that's what's just so fantastic about this squad at the moment. When it's in full flow and fully confident with the kind of fluidity we saw today. You have a player like Ramsey who struggled for four most of the season playing as well as he did. You can not. I wouldn't say Ozil was a passenger at all, but you can have Ozil playing below the kind of average performance he's put in this season and still come out with a comfortable 3-0 victory. So it's great to see, and I think that the change made a lot of sense. Welbeck and Cazorla coming on, and we continue to dominate the game from there on in. So I think it's with Monaco coming off on Tuesday. Ozil will 100% be up, ready and raring. Both him and Alexis, I imagine, will be starting and hopefully can put in a better shift than they did today.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because on 64 minutes, Alexis was subbed off. Paul, summarize Alexis' day for me, and overall, is he struggling, or is he just not hitting the heights that we came to expect from a spectacular start to the season? Just to put it in perspective, who scored, not that they are the Bible, but outside of Theo Walcott, he was the lowest rated of our starting 11.
Yeah, well, back to who scored. I thought Theo was actually pretty good, so that tells us something.
Yeah, well, I think the misses unfortunately count against him. We'll get to Theo a little more later.
Yeah, but he didn't have an Ozil kind of off day. Ozil was patchy but decent in the first half, and to me fatigued in the second half, and he talked himself out of that game by the end of it. Yep. Alexis was maybe similar, but didn't talk himself out of it, kept plugging away. So I think they're both good candidates for a bit of fatigue. And, maybe a park bus against West Ham is not their favourite kind of venue. Now, there were lots of exciting counterattacks that we should have actually done a lot more for. I do debate, I'll turn in my Arsenal card for a second. I do debate just how good at counterattacks we are. We're really good at getting them started. I don't know how ruthless we are in the counterattack. Sometimes we're great, but we have so many counterattacks, especially today, where we really should be more clinical. We should be faster.
Yeah. The final ball is missing in the counterattack, right? Because there were some fantastic counters today in terms of the play through the middle of the pitch and into the final third. And then it seems like the decision making at that key final moment has not been right.
Yeah, and why I have sympathy for Alexis, because it maybe wasn't perfect playing against a park bus. Him and Ozil should have been having a field day on those counters. But it does kind of go back to when Theo plays, it's funny how often the play dominates around his wing. Now, it'll create chances on the other side because it pulls the play over there. But, it was kind of, I wouldn't say it's the Theo show because it was all about his brilliant play, but it's funny how stuff gets sucked over that way, and Alexis was kind of quiet.
Yeah. I mean, the problem you have with Alexis, I think, to some extent, is the style of player he is. If it doesn't come off, it can be disruptive, right? He was 72% passing, which isn't great. He likes to try to dribble, which means he's going to have some unsuccessful touches. He's going to give the ball away sometimes. And today it just wasn't coming off for him. No key passes, no accurate through balls, no accurate crosses. Just not his day in terms of end product. And I do wonder if maybe defenders are starting to figure out that it's going to be one step over, one touch to the inside, and try the curling shot on your right foot, because he went for that a couple of times today, and they were more than ready for it. Third goal, we're firing on all cylinders by that point. Looked like we could go on to score 4, 5, 6 after we got the second. James, I thought the third goal was actually all about Giroud, made it easy for everyone else. What do you think of the beautiful third, Santi curling a far post cross for Flamini to tap in?
Well, that was a typical Arsenal game goal, as typical as it comes, really. Mm-hmm. It epitomised the whole sort of Wenger ball performance from mostly start to finish all game long. It was a great little 1-2 between, I think it was Santi Cazorla and then Danny Welbeck. And then that flick on from Cazorla to Giroud back to Cazorla. That, I mean, as you said, that's what made that goal. And his flicks all game long were absolutely superb, Giroud. He combined with a couple of them with Theo Walcott extremely well, especially on the counter-attack. And then, of course, for the second goal too. So, I mean, that play, it was great. One-touch football. I mean, Flamini couldn't have had an easier opportunity. And it was quite amusing because the person I was watching it with, when Flamini came on, I said, I reckon Flamini is about to go play number 10. I bet he's going to play behind the striker. And there he was popping up in the 6-yard box for the third goal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and it's great because I think even at the 1-0 at half-time and then waiting that little bit for the second, you felt that even a 2-0 scoreline wouldn't really have been a strong representation of just how well we played that game. So it was nice to get the third goal on top of it, just to almost really hammer home, so to speak, how well we played today. And I think we more than deserved those a 3-goal win today, and it was fantastic to see.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, man of the match. I'm going to assign you each a player, and you're going to make the argument for why they're man of the match. There are really only two choices, Giroud and Ramsey. Paul, you're the Giroud camp. Make the argument for Giroud as man of the match.
He grabbed that game by the scruff of the neck while others were thinking about shooting, and that continued on through the game and debating philosophically and existentially what to do with the ball when in a great position. He took that ball, although they were passing back and forward to each other. In the end, he grabbed that ball off Ramsey and smacked it into that left-hand corner. And, that opened up the game. At that point, we were about to go into halftime, frustrated, wondering, was it going to be our day? Was it going to be their day? And he had the balls to step up, grab that game, and crack it wide open. Mm-hmm. Short reply, but, all through that game, he was involved in every single goal, played crucial roles, his touches. He was like on a pinball machine. He was that blobby thing up near the top that everything pings off, and before you know it, you got several 100,000 points, and you don't even know how the damn game works.
He's never been described as that blobby thing before, but I'll allow it.
But he's that hub in the middle that people ping off, and it just cracks the whole thing wide open. So to me, that was the defining moment of the game, and for that he gets that large bottle of champagne.
Yeah, what I loved about his performance is some days I feel like he's too intent on his flicks and his layoffs. You know, and his dummies. I mean, he had a brilliant dummy. I guess which goal was it for? The Ramsey goal. He dummied it to Ramsey back to Giroud. One of the other was off a throw in, so it was the second, right?
Yeah.
He got his flicks and his dummies and his shots right. He did them in the right moment, the right way today. Whereas sometimes, you know, it's the flicks to no one and the dummies to no one. Great game for him. We'll expand on Giroud more in a minute. But now, the real man of the match was Aaron Ramsey. James, make your argument.
I'm so glad you gave me Ramsey.
I know. Well, I was thinking about giving you Giroud just to piss you off. But you know what? It's been a great day. I want to keep you happy. Let's go.
I will just quickly have a little shout out for Koscielny, who I thought was also excellent. But Ramsey was a player that I was most excited to see in the starting 11. He's had a pretty poor season by all accounts, following what was an absolutely incredible all-round season in 13-14. And perhaps a lot of that can be put down to the sort of staggered injuries he suffered from all season. But when he plays well, Ramsey is, without a shadow of doubt, the most well-rounded player in this Arsenal squad. It was fantastic to see because he was the player when, at 0-0, with those two banks of 5, or with 10 men behind the ball, Ramsey was the player that was picking up from deep and he was driving. You could see he was the man that was getting that ball in midfield. And his passing was efficient. You know, he was constantly progressing that ball forward. He was driving at players. He was making things happen. I think he played in Theo for that, whether it was the second or the third chance he had. He's got great vision. And you know, the one thing that's frustrating with Ramsey sometimes, especially when he's lacking a bit of confidence, we often talk about bring it back to the basics when he's struggling. And sometimes something he does a little too much, or those little flicks, you know, similar to Giroud in some regards, or those little back heels, especially in your own third. And he did have a couple of those. In fact, a couple of them did come off and did look quite nice. But the one thing you could see was at the end of that performance, you could see him brewing with confidence. He's a player that thrives on when he's playing well and when the team's playing well, and he's making so many good runs into the box. You said earlier on in the pod, I think was it around 95 touches that he had in the game, 96 touches?
Yes, 95, yeah.
And I think that, that second goal really capped it off for me because he looked our most dangerous player in that final third. I mean, Giroud was excellent. Don't take me wrong, and he was absolutely integral, especially in those 3 goals. But a lot of what he brought to that game was his little layoffs and that player coming from deep and also the way his ability to track back and to contribute defensively, but also to then put a stamp on the game and really consistently come up with and find spaces and create chances. I think it's part of Ramsey's game really, is that he likes to have a pop when perhaps he could take the ball under control and look for an easier option. But he's constantly looking for that goal, and today you could just tell that there seemed to be something about him. He was so much better with the ball than he's been for the large majority of the season. And I tweeted, because I've been following his performance all game long, and I tweeted that today's performance was far closer to the 13-14 Ramsey than I'd expected, especially after coming back from another injury. And we've seen him this season take a few games. I think it's only really been that Galatasaray game, and that was one in which there wasn't much sort of pressure involved in that tie. That was the one game where he excelled, and today was probably his best performance this season, even on top of that Galatasaray. I think that's slightly exaggerated just because of that wonder goal he scored.
Right, I agree.
And frankly, if there's one player who tends to bring form in from, a good form in from one game to the next, it's Aaron. I don't think there's any player in this team that, and all players obviously thrive off confidence, don't take me wrong, but I don't think there's anyone who really carries it forward as much as Aaron does. And I think that's probably the biggest positive from this game, is if Aaron can play like that going into the back end of this season, we are going to be very difficult for teams to handle.
Yeah, I mean,
absolute bollocks.
Yeah. He was the man of the match. Come on. Yeah, I mean, Giroud was great. We're gonna big up Giroud a little bit more. But so let me just say this. I mean, sometimes the statistics lie, and I think sometimes with Ramsey, because he's always so involved, the statistics can actually make the game sound better than it was. But let's just go through some of them. 4 tackles, 3 interceptions, 95 touches, played 76 passes at an 84.2% accuracy. He had 5 key passes, an accurate through ball. I mean, he was everywhere, not to mention, of course, that he had a goal, he had an assist, he had 4 shots, a successful dribble. So he really filled up the stat sheet, as they would say in basketball, but it really applies to him there.
That's just showing off, though.
Yeah, it is. It's selfish. It's showing off. I mean, other players want to be statistically relevant too. So, you know what? It's great to see them combining that way. And I think there's a question I want to get to now. And we're going to get to the rambly analysis part of the pod, although not too rambly because I'd like to keep this to the hour mark because the thought that anyone would listen to us beyond that is unconscionable.
Indeed.
So, interesting question, I think, because it's mine. Santi Cazorla doesn't start today, and Ramsey plays the position he's been playing. Ozil seems to definitely be in that number 10 position to stay now. Alexis is the left wing. Giroud has played his way to being undroppable. I mean, FA Cup aside, seemingly undroppable at center forward. And I don't think you're going to put Cazorla on the right wing regularly. With Ramsey playing this well and the team looking this good, Paul, is there an argument that Cazorla could be back on the outside looking in, at least theoretically? I mean, it's hard to say if Ramsey can play like this, it's hard to say that he should play that deeper lying playmaker role. I don't think he's going to get Ozil's role, and he's certainly not going to get Alexis's on the left wing. That only leaves the right wing as a starting position. Is Cazorla's starting spot up for grabs now, or is he still a definite starter? And if so, where?
Well, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I think his spot is up for grabs. I love Santi. I think he's played.
He's been among our best players in this resurgence, but
he
still
has. But he's had a couple of games where he's been invisible. He's had a couple of other games where I thought he was invisible, and then I went and had a look back at it, and he was actually involved in a hell of a lot that was good.
I'm going to interrupt again. I thought the games where he was invisible, unfortunately, too, were big games. I mean, like away at Spurs, for example, he could not impose himself on that game once.
And Monaco.
Monaco, yeah.
And if we look at the Kondogbia goal, there was a lot of fuss about Per. I remember somebody saying, where was Coquelin? Well, Coquelin was on the left side of the field closing down, helping to close down what was going on there. So they moved the ball over to the right side of our field. Mm-hmm. And Cazorla didn't get within a mile of Kondogbia, and neither did Mertesacker. Well, you know, Kondogbia came charging through the middle. He had all the time in the world.
Let me put it to you this way, Paul. On the evidence of how we played today, whose spot would he take?
Well, so Ramsey would come in for Cazorla.
Right. So I mean, I'm saying if Cazorla was going to start, who would you drop from today's squad to give Cazorla a start?
Ramsey.
So you would, but like, would you do that right now, or would you be inclined, you know, on this performance to keep Ramsey starting?
God, so tough. I think right now, you know, Cazorla has still somewhat earned that spot, and Ramsey needs to prove one more time just how good he is, and he's got to win it back from Cazorla.
Yeah, I agree. And James is desperately typing in the little chat window we have to let him add. But James, this is the analysis section where you, of course, get your moment. So you have nothing to worry about.
You've thrown me off now, Elliot.
No, we're now into the free-form analysis section. It's a whole. This is our laissez-faire section. It's going to be fine.
It's all too new to me.
He's such a virgin.
So James, I mean, this is your big moment. What do you make of Cazorla's position? I mean, again, you can't overstate how important he's been to some extent, but you look at who he's going to replace, and the only arguments are left wing, number 10, or deep lying playmaker. I don't think he's going to take Ozil's place or Alexis's place. Would you let him come back in for Ramsey?
No, I wouldn't let him come back in for Ramsey. I'd play him at number 10 and have Ozil come out to the right.
Out to the right?
Yeah, I think.
Have we ever done that? Has Ozil played on the right for us?
Yeah,
he's been a left winger when he's played in the front line.
Well, I mean, Alexis can play right, but I think there have been a couple of occasions. I think even just for a brief spell, I think it was Ozil that came off last today, wasn't it? I think there was a spell then before he came off of, was it Flamini, that he was out on the right, with Welbeck on the left. I honestly think that's certainly what I would go with. I don't think you can drop Cazorla because his best performances have come when he's played the 10. Yes, he's been caught out on a couple of occasions against big teams when he played the deep lying role. He's not as comfortable with it, but he's still excellent there. But he's not as comfortable with it compared to that number 10. I really do think, we've seen with Rosicky coming out on the right, I think that was a way to QPR, that Wenger does like to have players that can hold the ball in the final third. So I really wouldn't be surprised to see Cazorla play 10, Ozil out on the right, Alexis left.
I'm going to challenge you on this real quick.
Against Monaco.
I would argue that when you don't play Ozil in the 10, you shouldn't play him at all because we have better wingers than Mesut Ozil. I don't know that we have a better number 10 than Mesut Ozil. So my argument is, if you want to play Cazorla in the 10, which is fine by me, I would say you have to drop Ozil. Are you still comfortable doing that?
Well, well, the thing is, I fundamentally disagree. I think you can 100% play Ozil at the right.
I think you can. I'm just saying, don't you think legitimately we have better wingers who give us more width, more pace, more options? I mean, Ozil is not fundamentally a winger, and we have players who are.
But the way we interchange, like Rosicky's not fundamentally a right winger, but the role suited him in the way that we played with our front three against QPR. And listen, frankly, with Alex Oxlade, if Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain was available for this Monaco game, then he'd be my first pick out on the right wing. I think Monaco are going to sit deep to not concede 3 goals. There's unlikely to be that much space for Theo to run in behind if Monaco carry out that efficiently. I'm not even convinced Welbeck's a naturally wide player, someone who likes to come in a lot as well. I think you'd see, especially with the way that Ramsey drives forward, the interchange between the Ozil, Cazorla, Ramsey, especially the way we were playing today, for example. I think that can work absolutely excellently. But I mean, I could be wrong. I understand theoretically you probably want a player who's got, although I think Ozil's pacey, but a player who's more likely to drive straight and run in behind, and I can see that argument 100%, and it certainly wouldn't surprise me if one of the two is to get dropped, and if it's between the two of them for the number 10 position, I mean I'd have to go Ozil, I suppose, but Cazorla's been so excellent.
He has. I mean, but isn't that the conundrum? I mean,
it is a conundrum, but I think it's better to have your best players on that starting 11, especially given how fluid and dynamic we can be in that front three. I really, really, really would not be surprised to see Ozil out wide.
When was the last time we played as well, especially through the midfield, as we played today?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, we haven't played as well as that for a long time. But then again, you could look at an individual performance such as Alexis, and based on purely that performance, you'd probably say, well, if you looked at it in just a vacuum, he's probably the player that was most likely to be dropped as a result of that game. But that's, you can't just judge players purely on a one-off and just off, one. We played West Ham at home. Fine, we played extremely well. They're not a fantastic team, and it's not always.
And they're in bad form. It's
not always going to play out like that, and I really do think Ozil, he's played wide plenty of times. He's played wide, for Madrid on several occasions. He's come out wide, albeit he might start it on the left, but you tend to see especially if Alexis is on the left, maybe then Alexis and Ozil will interchange. You can have Alexis who I think honestly could do with varying it up, coming out more to the right and playing as that wide player with his right foot, because he cuts in just so regularly, and it's the one part of his game. I think he's got a very good left foot. I don't know why he doesn't use it more, frankly, because there was that one chance on that counter attack where he looked somewhat clean through on goal, and he cut it back just as you pretty much always expect he does, and the defender read it.
Well, he floated one across the box aimlessly towards Theo Walcott when he had no one standing in front of him and nothing but the keeper in the net.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, here's my problem, right? I want the wingers. What I want from wingers is I want them to make defenders shit themselves. I want fullbacks to look at our wingers and think, if I put 1 foot wrong, he's past me. Alexis gives you that threat. Theo Walcott can give you that threat. Oxlade-Chamberlain can give you that threat. Even Welbeck, because of that, the way he gets the ball out of his feet and can just blow right past you. We even saw it today, despite some poor distribution by Welbeck. Ozil, I think, is a terror in the middle of the pitch, because if there's even a tiny window of room to find someone, he'll find them. But on the wing, I think he doesn't challenge fullbacks in that way. He doesn't pull the center backs over to his side because the fullback doesn't need help. And I just that to me is why I don't love him out on the wing. I think we really have to acknowledge that right now, Sandy Cazorla's best chance to start is in the deep lying playmaking position. And Ramsey just stepped up and put a marker down today and said, I'm better at that position. Now, he may not be right. It may still be Cazorla on the evidence of multiple games. But I think it's certainly an open debate. You would never have said a couple weeks ago that Cazorla's position in the team would be in any way under threat. But I think today at least gives the manager something to think about. Let's move off the topic, though, because we could go on about that for ages, and I want to start to wind down just a little bit. I want to talk Theo and Welbeck. You can't put finishing aside. If you could put finishing aside, then you could say Giroud didn't have such a bad game against Monaco. But finishing aside, if Theo finishes his chances today, you'd say that's what he can do. He can cause havoc in the back four. Now, he didn't finish his chances, so that's not what we're saying. I'm going to give each of you a chance to answer this question. Paul, Theo versus Welbeck. I thought Welbeck didn't have a very good day when he came on either, in that I thought his distribution was poor and generally he was a little sloppy with the ball. We know Welbeck gives you more work rate. Does Theo give you more danger, though? Does Theo feel more like someone who's got goals in him, or do you prefer Welbeck because he just works more on and off the ball?
Well, I mean, Theo's definitely more dangerous, and in his opportunities. Now, he had more time on the pitch, but even if you took Theo's first, say, 20 minutes to compare it to Welbeck's last 20 minutes, different phases of the game, but even in those tight spots, Theo probably had 3 decent chances to make something happen, and you can say, well, he should have finished them, but you can't take that away from him. You'd almost say only Theo would have been in those situations. But I wouldn't knock Danny as well. What I really enjoyed today was seeing Welbeck and Theo on the pitch for a few minutes, and Welbeck, just comparing and contrasting Welbeck on the left-hand side. I mean, although his distribution wasn't great and his touches weren't great, he really opened up that game and created danger in a different kind of way. There are different kinds of danger. So I think it's they bring such different things, even if they end up starting from the same position. At the end of the day, I'm a Theo man. I still think what he does is underrated. But what I love from an Arsenal standpoint is if you look at the changes we made today of bringing Cazorla on, of bringing Welbeck on. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not one or the other. You got 3 substitutions every game. You got some rotations. You got different styles of play. You're really looking not at 11. You're looking at 14. And I think Welbeck, Cazorla, Ozil, Ramsey, Sanchez, Ox are going to get plenty of minutes. Somebody like Jack, I fear for. But that crowd, they're going to get plenty of minutes in this next 10, hopefully 11 or 12 games if we manage to pull a miracle off in Monaco.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that Ramsey gives you that maybe Cazorla doesn't as much, Ramsey wants to make the run not to the edge of the box, not into the box, but all the way to goal. He wants to run past every last player and be the last guy standing in front of that keeper. And Giroud, I think more than anyone, just feeds off that because that allows him to play those layoffs and those flicks, and he loves it. I think Cazorla likes to get to about the edge of the box, and that's about it for him. A tremendous player, though. I'm not criticizing him. I think it's an interesting position to be in. What about you, James? Welbeck, Theo, what do you make their performances today, and who's more dangerous? I mean, we know who works harder, but who's more dangerous?
Oof, it's a really tough question, and it's a good conundrum to have. Let's be frank. The problem with Theo...
I'm always frank and earnest with the ladies. In Cincinnati, I'm frank. In Detroit, I'm earnest.
The ladies' man.
By the way, that's a quote from a movie, The Long Kiss Goodnight. Excellent movie. If you haven't seen it, Samuel L. Jackson. Worth picking up and checking out.
Good, I'll be sure to check that out anon. But anyway, Theo Walcott he's a one-dimensional. He's a sort of two-dimensional player. But what he does excellently. The problem I have with Theo right this moment is I think a lot of his poor finishing can probably be put down to having been so long out of the game. And a lot of finishing, I think, just comes down to your mentality and your composure as a player, and perhaps confidence too. And that's something that comes with game time and actually, burying a couple of goals in consecutive games. And, having been out in and out of the side now, I feel more comfortable with seeing Welbeck on the team sheet in the very short term. But then again, in a similar way, I was desperate for Ramsey to continue playing just so that he was allowed to get into that rich vein of form. I do get the sense every time I see Theo Walcott on the field, every time he gets that chance, I don't have the kind of confidence I would have had in him a year and a half ago, for example. But then again, that's something that you'd expect to come with a little bit of time, and he needs consistent games. Whether, say, a game like Monaco is a game where you want to throw the dice and say, well, you know what, Theo's probably going to create a few chances for himself with his runs. Is he going to put it away though? That it's a gamble. It's a decision that the manager's paid the big bucks for. On the other hand, Welbeck, I think in general you do tend to see he's not always that efficient with his passing. He doesn't make the runs in behind quite like Theo does. But what I really liked about his performance coming in, especially at that time of the game, was the way in which he chose to drive at people, because he has that pace and that physical strength. And sometimes you just want him to just take on that, especially when he's playing wide, just take on that fullback, use that pace and just and shrug them off the ball, because he does it well when he takes it on and when he has the confidence to do so. I think he's really quite excellent at it. And yeah, there are a couple of times where it doesn't quite work for him, but you could see as soon as he was on the field that he was causing them problems. And look, it's a great combination to have, because we cried out for pace last season. Both of those players have pace in abundance, but they both add a little. They both have something slightly different for the defender to worry about. You've got Theo, who the fullback has to constantly be looking behind, seeing when he's making that running behind of him, and then Welbeck on the other hand, who's more willing to come deep and then take the ball on and look to drive at a player, and also perhaps have that little interchange that we saw, say for example, between him and Cazorla leading up to the third goal. Whether it's Welbeck or Walcott, I mean it's just so difficult to say. It's it's a little bit, it's very much dependent on the context of the game, the type of team we're coming up against, but it's really a decision for the manager to make.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting one to see. But like I said, I really wouldn't be surprised to see Ozil, Cazorla, and Ramsey all on that field on Tuesday night.
It'll be interesting. I mean, the beautiful thing about it is right now we have some really interesting decisions that need to be made in picking that starting 11, but I think whichever one you pick, the quality is there that the player you choose can make you look good, and that's what a manager wants. We're just about out of time. Look, unhappy Sam Allardyce, 3 great goals, phenomenally fluid performance. It's enough to get you excited for Tuesday until you look and see that Monaco just won 3-0 also, by the way, admittedly against 9-man Bastia. But we're going to wrap up just really quickly, and I mean really, really quickly. Wink, wink at both of you guys. With this, what's your score prediction for Tuesday, Paul?
Oh, Jesus.
He can't help you now.
Oh, fuck it. We're going to beat them 3-1, go to extra time, and win it on penalties.
Jesus Christ, my heart can't take that. James?
I would have that any day of the week. That would be the most phenomenal sensation. You know what the score is going to be. It's going to be 2-0. We're going to score early on. We're going to give, or the players are going to give the fans hope for a good 85 minutes. We're going to score a second somewhere around the 80, just 80 plus minute mark, and it's going to be a frantic few 5 minutes, and we're probably going to have a chance or a half chance that we squander, and all the papers will be talking about how bloody heroic the performance was, but how we didn't do enough in the first.
I can assure you
half.
that's not how it will be portrayed on the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. But that's it for today, guys. Fantastic win, fantastic performance, and a lot of fun talking to both of you. You should be following these gentlemen on Twitter if you are not already. So to remind you how to do that, Paul can be found at Posden in my pants. You will genuinely enjoy following him there. It has nothing to do with what's going on in his pants, thankfully. Say goodbye, Paul.
Woohoo!
Perfect. And follow Gunnar Fanatic 49 on Twitter because he has a sunny disposition and he will make you feel encouraged by most things Arsenal most days, as long as we're not busy shitting ourselves to Monaco at home. James, as always, pleasure speaking with you.
Pleasure indeed.
It is a pleasure indeed. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. This has been another fine installment of the Arsenal Vision Post-Match Podcast. The next time you'll hear from us is as we look forward to the draw for the quarterfinals in the Champions League, having won 4-0 in Monaco. Until that time, have a great day. Cheers and goodbye.